Hello, Psychologies magazine readers, followers and friends. My name is Mary Fenwick. I'm going to give people a chance to catch up. Hi Laura, I'm Mary Fenwick. I write the Agony column for Psychologies magazine, and each week on a Tuesday I'm here to answer questions and just generally chat. So as you join, hi, thank you. Lovely to see everybody joining. Thank you, Laura. Thank you for the wave. Anna Maria, Chet's Maps of Joy. Hello and welcome. Hi, lovely to see you, Maps of Joy, saying hello. My name is Mary Fenwick. I write the monthly Agony Art column for Psychologies magazine, and on a Tuesday at 5:30 I'm here for what we're calling the weekly wisdom slot. No pressure. And my plan is to answer any questions that you've got, and each time that I come I'm planning to talk about a different subject, but that's kind of my background plan, because this is really the opportunity for anybody to ask questions or tell stories or share their experiences of being part of the Psychologies magazine community. Money Mindset Coaching says hello everyone. If you are familiar with Psychologies magazine, you might already know that you can get it delivered to your door. There's a link in the bio. I just checked this myself and discovered that the magazine is now calling itself an emotional well-being. It used to be mindful living, but you get the picture. We're a magazine that is interested in kind of the psychology of everyday life. I'm personally always really interested in the latest research and how it applies in practical terms. And we're generally motivated by kindness, practicality, Psychologia from Turkey. Hello. What was I saying? As a magazine, we've got values around kindness and practicality, I guess. We always want what we say to be useful, reassuring, maybe give you another perspective. So as I said, my name is Mary Fenwick. I write the Agony Art column, and I'm here every Tuesday at 5:30 to answer any questions and to see if there's any stories or experiences that you'd like to share. What I thought we'd talk about this evening is communicating in challenging times, because in the other part of my life, which is working as a business and executive coach, I work with teams in businesses and not-for-profits, and also leaders, particularly women leaders. So I've got a long-standing interest in supporting more women to stand up and be counted in public life. So women in those roles where there's a number of people looking at them for their example and their opinions. Hi Charmaine, hi Kalila, and hi Rosie. It's always really lovely to know where people are joining from, and when I watch other people's Instagram lives, I've realised that it's worth it if I read out some of the names, because you don't always see the comments when you watch later. Hi, and Andrea DeSanti, I think. Hello. So, as I said, I want to talk about communication in challenging times, because obviously it's pretty challenging times, and even as we get back to work, it's still pretty tricky. So I was wondering if we might use this time to share. Maps of Joy says, oh Lord, I need to hear about this subject. Well, I'd really like to know what specifically you'd like to hear, because I'm actually going off the back of a whole presentation, a workshop that we've just done on my teams and leadership side about how to communicate in challenging times. And this was pulling together our expertise, and that's partly, I've got a colleague who is studying leadership at Oxford. Hi Nikki, great to see you. I've got another colleague who has got a background as a barrister and mediator, and obviously there's me, where I'm as I said, a coach for women in leadership, and also have my Agony Aunt gig, which I've been doing for about 7 years for Psychologies now. So I'm always interested in what are the tiny little stumbling blocks that get in the way of you being your best self, because when it comes to communicating, we probably already know, many of us know the way in which we want to be perceived as communicators. We would like to be perceived as straightforward, honest, respectful, authentic, to be good listeners. All of these things are how we want the conversation to come across. But when times are tough, it's much more difficult to maintain ourselves in that space, and we're really easily triggered into reacting badly to how other people are in our perception speaking back to us, or what they're doing wrong. So as I say, I'd love to know any comments or experiences that you have about communication in challenging times. What's helping you at the moment? Any examples that you'd like me to go into in a bit more depth. Can't promise that I'll always have the perfect answer, but if I haven't got an answer off the top of my head, I'll get back and add it in the comments later. So, communicating in challenging times. We opened our session that we've been running, we've run it a few times recently. We open it with a Maya Angelou quote, and some of you may well be familiar with it. The quote is, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." So in many ways, that's what communication is all about. And I also have a background in studying, it's called conversational intelligence. There's an academic called Judith Glaser who started out as an anthropologist, and she became very interested in the impact of conversation on our brains, because our brains are obviously very engaged with conversation. Different parts of our brain will be lighting up, and particularly with babies where their brains are very plastic, your conversation, your interaction with them is actually forming their brains. And Money Mindset Coaching says 100% agree with this quote about people remembering how you made them feel. We also started our session by talking about the iceberg of communication, which is, as you're communicating with somebody, all you're seeing and hearing is their position. This is called the pin model. Oh, I'm a great listener, but when it comes to putting my thoughts across, I get all flustered at the sound of my own voice. Maps of joy. That's so interesting. I wonder whether would you be the kind of person who you need a bit of time to think about what you're going to say, or is it literally that you sort of get a bit too hyper-focused on your actual voice? Because one of the things I was going to talk about was our different preferences for how we want to communicate or be warned about a difficult conversation, that kind of thing. And that none of this is to say that I'm getting it all right myself. I'm practicing and getting it wrong and getting it better, getting a do-over, having to apologise, trying again, all that stuff. But I thought I'd talk a bit about the things in general we can bear in mind. Yeah, I need the time to think. I'm an introvert, says Maps of Joy. That is my preference as well, which is part of the reason that I said that when people ask me a question live, I feel that I can't always guarantee I'm going to give the best answer off the top of my head. I do also think by interacting with people in conversation, but I do definitely like a bit of time to think and evolve my thoughts. So I'm talking this evening about communicating in challenging times, and what are the general lessons that might help us as we maybe even negotiate things like going back to work or changing our patterns of working. maybe we have to have a challenging conversation about money in the household, about boundaries, about whether we're happy with having other people in the house, that kind of thing. So all of these are conversations which could be difficult when we're already under stress. And I started to say that when we go into one of these conversations, we're aware of our own position, let's say, and we're aware of the other person. We become aware of the other person's position, and we can see their behaviour. But what we might not we might not have an awareness of is the way they're feeling and what their kind of interests are. And we almost certainly won't have a sense of how they might have deeper needs, which they may not even be conscious of, a kind of a need to assert their status or something like that. And we can't really be aware of that as we're going into the conversation. We're also aware of our own intentions, and we're aware of the impact that other person is having on us. But we're not really aware of their intentions, and we're not really aware of our impact on that other person. And this particular way of thinking comes from mediation, where what happens is when there's a challenging communication, there's a phenomenon which is called sinister attribution. We think the worst of the other person in that moment where it's going badly, and we attribute, we believe they deliberately lied. So we're judging other people quite harshly when we're kind of agitated ourselves. So what did I say? What else did we say? The general things about communicating when it's challenging, and I'd love to hear from anybody who could comment on whether they find these things easy, whether you think that you're consistent in being able to do these things, what helps you if you suddenly in the middle of a conversation lose track and realise that you're not doing a great job. How do you get it back on track? So in general, these are things that can help. To listen out for what you're not hearing. So having this awareness that not everything is on the surface, but paying attention to whether their words match their actions. So for example, I'm perfectly relaxed. You probably would pick up on that, but that those are some of the things that you might be deliberately more conscious of in a tricky conversation. The idea is that you're wanting to truly understand, and some models of communication would tend to say that people can't really listen until they feel they've been heard. So the most constructive way to go into a difficult conversation is with the intention of understanding the other person's underlying needs, their interests, their feelings, those kind of things. It's not always possible. But yeah, connection is the main point of communication, isn't it? Then we talked a bit about communicating with transparency. Money Mindset Coaching says, people often use the languaging "I'm fine" as a pushback to keep others away. Yeah. We talk about this a bit at work, actually. It's very difficult, though, isn't it? It's really difficult, especially if you're feeling vulnerable. It's not that possible to open up immediately, is it? If somebody asks how you are, you're quite tempted to say "I'm fine" because you haven't yet gauged whether this is a person that you really want to tell that you're not at all fine. And it's always a risk when you open up like that. We've talked about using the technique of "how are you really?" and just pausing to listen. I sometimes use a technique of describing what I see or describing my experience of that person. Like, I noticed that you were quite snappy with the children earlier, and that's not like you, and I was wondering what's going on. So that's a way of not accusing anybody, but just to say what you've noticed and say it with your positive interpretation. Money Mindset Coaching says, yes, pausing to listen is so important, holding space. And that is probably one of the things that goes first at the moment, isn't it? It's really, really difficult to hold that space and truly pay attention. I'm actually finding that sometimes it's better to do this on the phone even than a visual thing, because you can listen to somebody's breathing. Although obviously you're picking up more cues by watching somebody's face. But Maps of Joy says, I often feel like the fear of communicating not very well stops me from connecting with others on a deeper level, and yes, just end up saying I'm fine. Oh, that's interesting. The fear of communicating not very well stops me from connecting. Interesting. We can't have this depth of communication with everybody. Would it be possible to say something like, I can feel this urge within me to say I'm fine, but the truth is I'm having a bit of a tough day, or I'm finding it hard to let go of such and such. Just to acknowledge where you are. Is that a possible way of dealing with it? It's not something you do all the time. I say I'm fine loads and loads. People are in a hurry. I might be in a hurry. But just as a way of opening up sometimes, because if you're never able to, I fear I'll be judged. Oh, that's a good idea. Right. Okay. I fear I'll be judged. It's so interesting, though, that fear that we have of being judged, because if you think about how we feel very embarrassed about our own vulnerability. We don't like to, Maps of Joy is saying, I hadn't thought to put it like that. Oh, thank you. Good. I'm glad that might be helpful. We have this fear of vulnerability, don't we? That we think people are judging us for our vulnerability. But anytime somebody's been vulnerable with me, I just feel so much. I feel deeper connection. I feel admiration of their courage. Fear, false evidence appearing real. Yeah, so tough in the moment though, isn't it? You're having those. You might even be experiencing like palpitations and not being, racing thoughts going too quickly for you to be able to catch up with them. It is really hard, isn't it? But one of the things about not wanting to open up is just thinking about times that somebody has been vulnerable. You feel closer to them in that moment, and I would argue that your feeling of closeness lasts. I've cried in the last week, honestly. I've been in 2 different conversations where I was going to say I inadvertently made another person cry, but it's not really inadvertent. It was kind of, it wasn't accidental and it wasn't intentional. Yeah, whenever someone opens up to me, I feel closer to them. Yeah. So I've been guilty twice in the last few days of saying something that has apparently made another person cry. And I wouldn't say it was deliberate, but I wouldn't say it was kind of not deliberate. One of them was a conversation about money, which I knew was going to be really difficult. And a lot of the feelings are not directly to do with me. So sometimes it's being able to allow the other person's upset, just allow it and say, you seem really upset, I'm really sorry. And the other person who I made cry and didn't know that was going to happen, that was literally one of those reflective techniques where I said, a mutual friend has told me that in all the time he's known you, he's never seen you this stressed, and I was wondering how you are. And I often phrase my questions, I was wondering. Another technique that I use is to frame my hypothesis. That's what we call it in coaching. So, I'm thinking it's maybe this, and test that out with the person. However, this is going slightly off the track of what I intended to say, but I don't know how many people here have had the experience of getting unasked for advice in a difficult conversation. Now, I find that so tricky, and I guess in a way, this is maybe a particularly me thing, but when somebody gives me a piece of advice which is annoying for whatever reason in that moment, there's a part of me that is grateful at the same time, because I'm thinking that is such a great reminder of why it's annoying to get advice. And advice is usually to do with that other person's anxiety and desire to put things right. And rather than being with you in the pain and confusion, which might be all you want, they're wanting to kind of rush and make it right. But it's very difficult to put things right for somebody else, isn't it? So, anybody joining now, just to reintroduce myself, my name is Mary Fenwick. I write the Agony art column for Psychologies magazine, and each Tuesday at 5:30 I'm here for what we're calling weekly wisdom. Money Mindset Coaching says, here we go. Advice is not always supportive. It can come from a judgmental. I think it actually always comes from a judgmental space, but kind of deeper than that, the judgment might have a positive intention, or it might have a negative intention. But yeah, advice is always giving your own judgment, isn't it? Judgment and opinion. Advice for communicating with someone who feels threatened, criticised, and is being defensive. I have said explicitly in these words, I don't want to feel defensive. I want to communicate with you openly, and I'm trying not to put my own barriers up. I don't want to feel defensive here, and I really hope that you can not feel defensive as well. Everything I'm saying to you is because I really care, and I know that you actually want the best out of this, and that if I've been hurt, I know it's not your intention. So I'd be saying things like that. However, sometimes, and this is a really important element of a difficult conversation, it is being able to walk away, and that the person who I'm really influenced by here, it's so hard to remember that it can be coming from a good place but communicated clumsily. And in a way, the easiest way to reflect that. You go, oh wow, did you mean to say it like that? The person who I really turn to about difficult conversations is in fact John Gottman. Anybody who's read or heard me speak would know that I'm a massive fan of John Gottman, and he talks a lot about divorce, which is the ultimate breakdown in a relationship. But he talks about if you are being what he calls flooded by emotion, you can't think straight in that time, and you won't be able to have a rational conversation if you're just overwhelmed by emotion. So at that point, it's most constructive to take a break, and each of you do whatever you can to self-soothe. An interesting way to counteract it. Thank you. But not everybody can self-soothe. This is the other thing. You might be communicating with somebody who's I've just lost the ability to actually see myself. Oh, there we go. I accidentally flipped the camera and back. Hello, you've just been looking at my brick wall. And so that's your clue that I'm definitely doing all the tech myself. So this has been me, Mary Fenwick, the Agony Artful Psychologies magazine, on my weekly wisdom, 5:30 every Tuesday. Today I've been talking about communicating in challenging times. I've been talking about they'll retain the way in which we make them feel, that what we're seeing, the other person's positions and behaviours, is not necessarily telling us about what their deeper feelings, interests, maybe even their identity and their needs are. That listening is probably the single most powerful technique. And I've just seen a request to be in my live video, and I'm sorry, I still haven't checked whether we're going to be doing this. So, and plus, I've actually got to ring off, and I've got a coaching session coming up just after 6. So I'm sticking to half an hour tonight. So if Skeen, come back next week and we'll see if we can get you live. So during my divorce, I insisted on email communication. This is from Maps of Joy, because I'd get so flummoxed by more direct communication. It gave me time to think and self-soothe, for sure, and also get other people's opinions, I think. Yes, self-soothing is a whole other subject, isn't it? And I talked about how when it's difficult, the temptation is to attribute sinister motives to the person that we're communicating with. And I also talked about a few of my own techniques, which are to make it explicit what I'm thinking and what I'm seeing. You know, you seem more stressed and this is not like you. I'm thinking this is maybe blah, blah, blah. And to try and refrain from advice. Now, this is a subject I might revisit, actually, because there's a whole other set of things I was going to say about difficult communication. But in the meantime, just a reminder, the link in the bio to get a copy of Psychologies magazine delivered to your door if you're interested. My name's Mary Fenwick. I will be back at 5:30 next Tuesday. See you then. Bye.